Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome to the Demon Land podcast. Once again, I'm not Andy, but George. We had a win against the much-hated Hawks, which we all hoped would be a little bit more, because it was really a game of two halves, which we'll actually dissect later. Tonight is a cross-border effort with Andy away on holidays, who will put this program for us together later on. But joining me tonight from somewhere alongside his poolside, again somewhere in Southeast Asia, is Bin Man. Welcome, Bin Man.
G'day, George. Good evening, the Demon Landers. G'day, Andy. When you listen to this, if you listen to this when you put it together, yep, I'm in Siem Reap in Cambodia, and so huge, as I say here. I just lost. What do they say? I've said it a million times today. I'm actually in the hotel room, which is fortunate because it's 80% humidity outside. Apologies for my croaky voice. I had quite a 12 hours. So there's an area like there is in a lot of towns, I guess, in Southeast Asia called Pub Street, where I went down 24-hour sport on the television, and pretty seedy down there. And I went down at 1 a.m. in the morning in Cambodian time to watch the Socceroos and scream my lungs out, and then turned around and went down again to the same pub and watched the mighty Dees beat the Hawks. So it was quite a surreal experience. The rain was hammering down. It was 34 degrees, I think, 75, 80% humidity, and by all accounts, it was pretty cold down in Launceston. But fortunately for the game, it was actually pretty dry, wasn't it? So
yeah.
So it was quite the experience, and the yelling. So I completely lost my voice. It's only coming good now. So apologies for the croakiness.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the game. How did you see it? And we'll dissect it a lot more when we get to the stats and the listeners' questions. But what was your feeling after the game? I know there was certainly on some of the more feral Demon websites, everyone was bagging, and everyone from the coach to the boot starter about not walking over Hawthorn by 150 points. But I think everybody would have been very glad to take a 35-point win playing against them in Tasmania after they'd won 16 in a row, I think it was, or something ridiculous at that location.
Yeah, I think 13 in a row, 67 out of 88 games. I did the preview pod, and I was super, super surprised that we'd never played there at all, not once. So we hadn't played Hawks at there, but we've never played at York Park previously at all. So massive advantage to the Hawks from that perspective. Look, I was thrilled. I mean, I find that whole dialogue, it seems like it seems like a sort of deja vu all over again, because as I was saying before we jumped on, we started recording. I wish footy fans would start thinking about the game in, the season in totality rather than each game in isolation. Well, there's a big question about the sort of first half and two half, and so I'll respond to that then. But of course, it was disappointing to give up 9 goals, 10 goals, whatever it was in a row. We were never in any risk of losing that game, despite people's sort of inbuilt fears from St Kilda last year. And I mean, it just wasn't going to happen. Bottom line is, the interesting thing about, on Demonland, for instance, there was plenty of criticism of us giving up 10 goals and not being able to stop the momentum. Fair enough. King wouldn't have been happy with that at all. Not at all. And, I'd note that, though, in that context, we had 9 players in that game played less than 50 games. They took Max off for pretty much, a third of that last quarter.
Yeah, even the commentators said he was been off for about 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So, they talk about it all the time. Footy's about momentum. King would have been frustrated, like some of the kicking, dump kicking, but, as I'll unpack in a sec, they were out on their feet in that last quarter, so it was no surprise. But what I was a bit, I guess, frustrated with, one is people get banging on about, well, if we don't get that percentage, what does that mean? Like, it may not mean anything in the end of the season. It may not literally mean anything in terms of percentage. in this round we might have gone to fourth if we'd gone on to win by 100 points, sure. But at the end of the season, it may, it may not mean anything. But the other factor was that we actually did in the end kick 2 more goals. We finally got control. That's what they were trying to do. Clearly, they were trying to get control and slow the game down and get the game back into they were trying to do a kick mark exercise. That was evident. And I thought actually that they got very little credit on Demonland, if any. And I mean, I haven't read, because I'm overseas, obviously, I've barely read anything about it. But we did kick the last 2 goals and we won by, people go, oh, well, they got within 23 points. Well, you equally say, well, we were out by 96 points, so, and I thought it was super impressive that we kicked those last 2 goals and we were on the verge of kicking another just as the siren went. We easily could have. The line in that game was plus 14. So we had a 14-point handicap in the betting. We matched that by 50 points. So to win that game, of course, frustrating to give up. He would have been frustrated. That's, a bit of a function of having so many kids. Like, Langford had a quiet game. There's a question about that. So, of course, it was frustrating. It was last year, in this time, I was also here in Siem Reap and in Cambodia, and we lost to I watched the same pub down at Pub Street, and we lost to the Blues. That I can tell you for free, that was a lot more frustrating than beating Hawthorn by 6 goals at a ground we'd never played at, where they had 67 out of 88. As a general thing, though, this at the risk of being controversial, it was a terrific first half, awesome. But again, as I said to you before we started recording, I suspect that their long-term planning was to do a block of heavy training before this game, because at the beginning of the season, they would have been thinking, when can we get those blocks of training in? They would have looked at the fixture and thought, you know what, we're playing the Dees down at a ground that we win 75 to 80% of our games against a team that's never played at that ground. If we're going to take a calculated risk of a game, well, that's the one that we'll do, because their next block of games, apart from 1 or 2, is cruisy as. So they play a lot. They've got a really, good, easy run through to the finals, bar 1 or 2 tough games. So, I don't want to take the shine off that first half, but I think that was a factor that they were a bit fatigued. And, for me, a bit of evidence of that is Battle was sick, but he wasn't injured. And I would not be, I reckon if that was a must-win game, they would have played Battle. Watson had, I don't know it was variously what I read. I don't know. You might have more info. But he didn't have a hamstring awareness. I think he probably could have played.
Yeah, he pulled up in one incident the previous week, but it wasn't like he grabbed for his hamstring or anything like that. It was, he continued to play on in that game. It wasn't like he came off and they had a look at it. It was, perhaps. So
I reckon if that was a must-win game, Watson plays, Battle plays, particularly with Impey and Eamon out. And when I did the preview pod, I didn't realise Eamon was also going to be out. I don't think it was announced at that stage.
Yeah.
Massive outs. And Weddle, Weddle. I don't think. He hasn't and Weddle, but he hasn't been such a huge player this season.
Yeah, and then they dropped Reeves as well out of the ruck.
Yeah, I thought that was strange.
Yep.
And Meek, Meek had a good second half, but Maxie had another extraordinary performance. I thought it was a great coaching performance from King. I thought that, we'll talk about it in the stats file, but the keys to winning that I sort of highlighted, King had a real field day with some of them. He, really impressive performance. And, there are a couple of other things I read on. There's been the problem with that 96-point, lead, and then we give up a big chunk of it, is that it takes the shine off the win, Bottom line, it was a hugely important 4 points, because we got to finish top 6, and it massively increases our chances of finishing top 6 with, who have we got? We got the Tigers, and then is it the Roos?
Then North, and then the Suns, I think, is the next 3.
The other thing, George, I had to laugh. You and I would have seen our share of Hawks losses over the years, and there was a period there where they just were so arrogant, the Hawthorn team, towards us, and would smash us at the contest. And we've now won, what is it? I think is it 11 of our last 13 against them, or 12 of our last 14? That's, in the 80s, 90s, scarcely believable that we would go through a phase where we'd win 12 or 14 games. So thrilled about that. Just the final comment about the game, though. I was really curious on Demonland. There was a lot of talk about how much rain was falling in Tasmania at Launceston in the lead up to the game. Like, there's talk of 35 mils, and a fair bit did rain on the Wednesday and Thursday. But then the weather forecast was good for the Friday, and good for the Saturday. So I was a bit curious as to why people were so concerned about the condition of, that it would be a wet, slippery game. It wasn't wet and slippery, but that ground did not look like AFL standard to me. It was appalling.
There was comments even before the game from the commentators. It was a cow paddock. It was really substandard.
A cow paddock at the pub where I was watching it. At this, there's a million, like literally, without exaggeration, there's 30 televisions in this place. On one screen, a big screen, I was watching the Melbourne game, and then on a bank of other TVs next to me, Colombia were playing in the World Cup, but so were Fremantle and GWS, and that game was at Canberra. It looked like a bowling green, and they looked like they were playing, as you say, on a cow paddock down in Tassie. So I was thrilled, like really, really pleased that no one got injured. Because they were really taking half steps when they were turning. I don't think they should have played a game of footy on it, to be honest. And of course, frustrating that we have to play on it. That game, they would have got 70,000 at the MCG. That's
absolutely, yeah.
Terrific win. Hugely important win.
I thought it was really interesting, when you hear coaches talk about momentum in a game, and I think we saw momentum swings both for us and for Hawthorn in this game. And like you mentioned just before, I was really impressed, even when Hawthorn had kicked 12 goals in a row, how we were able to arrest that, even though it was in the last minutes of the last quarter. We were able to turn that around. That's a really telling thing that coaches want and need. You see the more experienced teams, the Brisbanes and the Sydneys, are able to control a match when it's absolutely necessary to control a match at times during it. But we did the same. I mean, Hawthorn were flying at that point, and we were able to turn it around. So even though there were 12 goals kicked in a row, but just as equally in the first half, Hawthorn were unable to stop us.
No.
Absolutely unable to stop anything that we did. So we had the momentum going our way. We also learned to shut down their momentum. It was a real contrast. I think we grew up a lot as a team in this particular game.
Yeah, and look, of course, it goes without saying that they would have been not happy. King would not have been happy with giving those 12 goals up. I'll talk to this when we go that first half, second half questions, that group of questions. But, we did in the end. They looked fatigued. Langdon stepped up in that last little bit, I thought. Chin stepped up. And Fritter as well. Fritter took his time. And
Colt in particular in those last couple of minutes. Absolutely amazing mark and kept his head.
Yep.
Delivered the ball, again, fantastic. He's really come along leaps and bounds in this season.
I'm glad you highlighted that, because I thought the same thing. He was relatively quiet in the first half, and I couldn't tell who he was tagging, but it sounds like Dylan Moore is what someone...
Yeah, they said Dylan Moore, and Moore didn't have a possession until Moore went into the mids.
Yeah.
So while he was on Colt, he got nothing.
And he's been super important for them more. And he was, I think he was their best player from memory against us in round 10. But yeah, I agree. I'm glad you highlighted Colt. And Moore, I mean, obviously he did a great job on Moore, but more for how he played in that last 10 minutes, because not only did he step up, but as you pointed out, he hit a beautiful kick. And that's all we needed to do. We needed to hit a series of kicks, and we couldn't. And, there were a couple of, I think it was really telling actually interesting that King highlighted in his presser the midfield when asked about that fade out. He highlighted the midfielders and the defenders because there were a few under pressure dump kicks that gave it straight back to them. That's what he would have been highlighting in the post match review. But also in the post match review, he would have highlighted, well, great, if you did get it back on your terms in the last 3 minutes and control the footy like he would have wanted them to.
Excellent. Okay. Binman doesn't know this, but I was going to allocate 1 minute for his stats files this week at halftime. And the challenge would have been to find a Hawthorn statistic that they betted us by in the game. However, as the game turned around in the second half, you've got your 10 minutes back. As usual for this segment, but we've got a couple of questions to be incorporated into the stats file from listeners because they're around stats. The first one was from Go Lordy. I'm keen to hear your review of the hot and cold performance in Tassie. Well, we've done that now. If you need some grist for the podcast mill this week, I've had another look at the numbers, this time using Willow's ratings for the players, just to get an idea of who is tracking well for the mighty Dees. I've looked at who was rated in the top 5 and who was rated in the top 10 in every game. I have no idea how to interpret this, but we have 19 players who have been rated in the top 5 in a game and 29 who have been rated in the top 10. It's no surprise that Max has been in the top 10 in every game, but midfielders Cozzy and Sparrow are close behind. And is this a surprise? So is Kay Chandler. Another question from Monocular was, I'd be most interested, Bin Man, in the quarter-by-quarter pressure ratings. Should be off the charts in the first half. Is there only so long that such pressure can be sustained? So, Bin Man, over to you for a little bit longer than 1 minute.
Good. Well, I'll do my best to make it 10 minutes, George. And Go Lordy, I'll take that question on notice and do a bit of. I haven't had time to analyse those the file you put on Demonland, and I will have a look at it and come back to it. But just as a sort of top of mind thought is that you highlighted Max Gawn, extraordinary. I think that and Cozzy as well. Although interestingly, Cozzy has dropped off a little bit in the last 2 or 3 weeks and actually wasn't very influential. Yeah, he was in that first quarter in terms of he had high meters gained in that first quarter, but he really dropped off. And as people know with the ratings, one of the things I really like about the player ratings is that it measures impact score as it relates to scoreboard impact, not just a cumulative. So it's not like the fantasy things that are really accumulative, how many you get X amount of points for a mark or whatever. And so in this game, for instance, Cozzy's rating was 6.6, one of his lowest for the season, and that's his third, maybe second, or perhaps his third low, average. He's averaging 17. He's our second highest rated player for this season. Maxie's our highest rated player for the season. Our third highest rated player for the season is Chandler. So you Go Lordy highlighted all of them, and really, really significant, particularly Maxie. I think it's an extraordinary season. I think, I don't know about you, George, but we're witnessing a grade of the game. And
yeah, I think we'll, when we talk about the greats of the club, people are yet to realise how good Max is. We talk about Robbie Flower and Ron Barassi and many others. This is one of the, and Jim Steins, but Max is one of the greats of the club already, and he's getting better and better. So people in the future will be able to say, yeah, I watched Max Gawn play.
Yeah, and I totally concur. I mean, as you know, for me, Robbie's in a different, I'm putting him to one side. But Maxie is not just a great of the Melbourne Football Club. It's going to be a long time before someone matches his record. I don't think anyone can come close. Skipper of a premiership winning side. 7 All-Australians, is it? He's
eight going for 9.
8 going for 9. I think if I'm right in saying Dangerfield, maybe he's 10 or 11, so he's chasing him down in terms of the most. He's been in our because obviously I track the player ratings. He's been in our top 2 or 3 players in almost every game, not every game, but I'd say 90% off the top of my head. He was in this game. His rating in this game was 18.9. 20 is considered elite. The other one that Go Lordy mentioned, Kate Chandler, he had an excellent game. He's been fantastic. Bit of comparison between him and Nibbler in the in the lead up and afterwards from the Crows game, and I love Nibbler, as everyone knows. But I have to say, Kate Chandler's gone past Nibbler. He's more, he's a better kick, a better field kick. He's more damaging by foot. He kicks goals, and he's turned into a massive leader. That's no, I'm not taking any shine off Nibbler in saying so. He also had a player rating of 18.9, so equal second with Maxi. Importantly, and I really put a big stock in players who play when the backs are to the wall a little bit. His highest rated quarter, Chin's highest rated quarter was the third quarter when they were coming at us, and I thought we hung tough really well in that third quarter. He had 10.9 player rating points in that quarter of his 18.9, so huge. And just a shout out to Jacob Van Rooyen, unquestionably his best game for the Melbourne Footy Club. I think, I have to check, I think this would be his highest rated. As I said, 20 is considered elite All-Australian level game of footy. He had 19 player rating points in this game, 90% time on ground, which you'd love to see, George. Just really, magnificent game, highlighted by an unbelievable first quarter. So of his 19 player rating points, 13.4 of them were in the first quarter alone. That is massive scoreboard impact. If he wasn't taking marks and kicking goals, he was handing them off, creating contests, bringing it to ground. And I don't know about you, George, but that's the best I've seen him mark almost his entire career.
Yeah, previously the knock on him was always in that he runs under the ball. It certainly wasn't in this game. He was just amazing, and more just as equally, he was doing the backup ruck role as well.
Yeah, he was,
and his best game for the club.
Yeah, and I thought he did that role pretty well too, and spot on about he not only was he one grabbing him, he wasn't running underneath the ball, and that mark he took is a good way of sort of understanding the player rating points. One of the marks he got was directly out of the centre, and it was all Maxi, it was all him. They would have split 6 points for the player rating on that, so 0.3 each. But the mark he took and goal, and we've talked about this age, he's got great kicking technique, and he really kicks through the ball. I love the way he kicks through the ball, but pushing Sicily under the ball and taking that mark was just I was going bananas in this pub in Cambodia. People didn't know what to think, because it was 10 a.m. in the morning there, and it was something else. Rounding out the top 5, just in the monoculars thing with pressure, I'll speak to that specifically when we talk about the whole conundrum about first half versus second half, because it's relevant to that discussion. Rounding out the top 5 for the Dees in this game, Jack Steele, unbelievable, stood up, leader. Who was he playing on? Was he negating someone, or was he?
I didn't notice, and it's next to impossible to see when you're watching on the TV in any case.
And so, he was our 1, 2, 3, our fourth rated highest player, 15 player rating points. Great pickup for the Melbourne Footy Club, hasn't he been? Rounding out the top 5, Tom Sparrow, he's been awesome. Speaking of young leaders, I think, and this is no criticism of track at all, or Class. This is nothing. I'm not trying to, do some backhanded whack on those guys. But I think those two leaving the club have been a making of him, not for any nefarious cultural reasons, but because he's been able to play as a full-time mid who has got defensive nous. I just love his, he's been in our he's been in our top 3 or 4 pressure players all season, and was again in this game. He was our 5th highest rated player, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th, 6th highest rated player, 14 player rating points. And here's one that will surprise a lot of fans, because there's a question about Caleb Windsor, and this is one of the things I love about the rating. Caleb Windsor was our 6th highest rated player, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7th highest rated player. He had 12 player rating points. Just, one of his better games for the season, and 6 of those player rating points were in the first quarter when we won the game. And again, just to sort of bang on about that, the reason I love the player rating points is because it forces you to rethink your sort of confirmation bias, just like it did for me in terms of thinking that Rivers had played poorly in several games when the player rating suggested otherwise. So, it's about impact on the scoreboard, not how many possessions you get. It's how impactful those possessions are. So just sort of going into the key stats, I said in the preview pod for this that the keys to winning would be, the first one would be winning the contest, and I made the point on the preview pod for this game. The contest and pressure remain undefeated in footy. It is the number one thing. It is the most important stat in footy, I reckon. The correlation between winning the pressure ratings and winning a game, I think, I'd have to check this, but my feeling is that it's, apart from the scoreboard, it's almost the most significant correlation. If you win the pressure rating, you almost invariably win the game, or get close. The sort of outlier to that was the Pies in 22 when was it 22 they won the flag?
21, I think.
No, we won it in 21.
We won,
20,
that's right.
23, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, 23.
Yeah.
So that year, because they were playing that outside game and sort of run and carry outside game, and other teams weren't. So they're the outlier. But since then, it's basically, you don't win games of footy, particularly big games of footy, if you don't win the pressure rating. So keys to winning: win the contest. The contest numbers in this game, we're plus 17 contested possessions. At the end of the first quarter, we're plus 25 for contested possession. That is off the charts and nuts. If you sustain that, that's plus 100 contested possessions for a game of footy. We're plus 30 contested possessions at halftime. We're plus 3 for post-clearance contested possessions. We're plus 2 for post-clearance ground ball gets. Plus 2 for contested marks, which is terrific because they're a really good contested marking side. And we are becoming a really good one. I think we're 3 or 4 in the AFL for contested marks. And we were plus 6 for pressure, 171 to their 165. So we won the pressure rating contest, and I'll speak to this later, but in more detail. But our last quarter, so we won the pressure rating by 6, but in the last quarter, I think we were negative 29 or something. It was 146. Our pressure rating fell to in the last quarter. The next key to winning that I said in the preview was winning the clearance and stoppage battle totals. So not the scores from them, the totals, particularly inside 50 in the front half of the ground. We were plus 1 for centre clearances in total. We were plus 15 for stoppage clearances. So therefore, we were minus 1 for centre clearances. We were plus 15 for total clearances for the game, but we were plus 17 at halftime for total clearances. We were plus 1, so 16. Another key was winning the scores, clearance and stoppage battle. So scores from clearances. It's one thing winning the totals, but the key is what you do on the scoreboard. Interestingly, this was inflated, of course, in the last quarter to an extent, but it was a surprising number nonetheless for me when I saw it. We were minus 7 for scores from centre bounces. Given Maxi's dominance, that was interesting, but that is inflated, of course, or impacted by that last quarter. But we were plus 21 for scores from around the ground stoppages. So we're plus 14 for the game for scores from clearances from both around the ground and the centre bounces. Just for a bit of context, in our round 10 game, so we were plus 14 for scores in this game from clearances. In the round 10 game, we were plus 42 for that number, which is unbelievable. That's nuts. So we, obviously wasn't as good as that, but yet it was actually wasn't as big a win in terms of margin, but we blitzed them obviously in the first half. I thought leading in that we had to win or at least break even from scores from turnover, and the key would be how well we used the ball, not turning it over, minimising clangers, but of course putting sufficient pressure on them to force them into turnovers and clangers. I noted in the preview that the Hawks are number 5 in the AFL for clangers per game, so that would be an opportunity for us if we could leverage that, and that proved to be the case. So they had 7 more clangers than us, so we were minus 7 clangers, 54 to their 61. So that was a big tick for us. And in terms from scores from turnover, we're plus 21. That was an absolute key to winning this game. So 67 points we scored from turnover, one of our highest, probably in our top 5 scores for the season for scores from turnover to their 46. So they actually did pretty well in terms of scores from turnover, but not as well as us. We were plus 21. As I said, that was a key to the win, I thought. Finally, the last key stat or key thing to winning thing that I said in the preview was stretching their defence height-wise and minimising their intercept game, because it's so critical to how they set up, how they win. They love to get those intercept marks, intercept as well, and set up from the back half, aiming out, impy out, and were critical outs for them. Battle out didn't help either, and Barras spent a big chunk of that first quarter off the ground. But even with those, caveats, I guess they still would have been hoping to do better in the intercept space. I thought King had did a great job minimising the impact of Sicily. I couldn't quite work out who. Do you know who was on Sicily? Did they run a defensive forward, or was it a team effort? Let's have a look. And finally, so on the intercepts, the Hawks are number 5 for intercepts per game, sort of evidencing how important it is to the way they play footy. Number 2 for least opponent contested marks per game as well, and number 4 for least opponent marks inside 50 per game. But in this game, we were +8 for intercepts, 71 for 63, and +3 for intercept marks. So we won all of those things that I hoped we would win, and all right, Demonland fans, welcome back to Demonland again. So apologies, we're having some technical difficulties. The Wi-Fi in the hotel I'm in isn't super great. So we're going to ask Andy to knit these together if he can. So apologies if there's a bit of sort of lumpiness with the audio file. We'll do our best, George and I, to battle on, even though he wasn't playing. So where I left it, I think, was that one of the last key for statistically was stretching their defence height-wise and minimising their intercepts. Apologies if I'm repeating myself from before. I'm not quite sure where we ended up, but the Hawks are number 5 for intercepts per game in the AFL, so evidencing how critical it is, as you know, in terms of their game plan. They're number 4 for least opponent marks inside 50 per game. They defend really well. Intercept is key to their game. Even without Amy in the Impy, they would have hoped Sicily would have been strong in this space. We had a great game, so big tip for that one. We were +8 for intercepts in total, 71 for 63, and we're +3 for intercept marks, 23 for 20 to 20. We did a great job minimising their strengths in that space, and we did a pretty good job ourselves of intercept marking and intercept. So that was another big key to the win, I think. So in all of the areas I highlighted on the preview, the Stats File preview pod, the keys to winning, big tick across all of them. And I think that they were the keys to winning in the end. Well done, boys. And statistically, a great game, particularly in that first half. Back to you, George.
Excellent. We've now moved on to our listener questions. Thanks, Ben-Man, for the stats. We've got a lot of questions along the same sort of theme this week, which was all about, obviously, the first half versus the second half of the game. So we'll work through them together and see what we come with why things happened the way they did. First one from Buck Naked. What was that? To be up so far up and nearly lose the game provides enormous heartache for supporters. They were always going to come back, but that was ridiculous. What do we not do to allow this? What do we need to change to stop it happening again? What said, I'm not convinced it was a fade out so much as they were just on. They could not miss. Sam D asks, bit of column A sprinkled in with a bit of column B. We clearly let our foot off the gas, whether it was mental or physical fatigue. We let them back in and just couldn't get back momentum. They also played brilliantly in that patch. Go Lordy says, I thought the bye would freshen us up and bring some speed back to our ball movement. It looked that way in the first half. Does our dismal performance in the second half, particularly the fourth quarter, mean that we've spent all our freshness? As someone else noted, our early season fourth quarter fast finishing was nowhere to be seen. 2 goals after they kicked 7 is not a fast finish, in my opinion. The question, have we spent all our freshness in one brilliant half of footy? Wells 11 says, did they load over the break, do you think? We've finished off games so well this year, it's hard to find another explanation for the fade of that size. Monocular again says, maybe spent all their tickets in one of the most dominant first halves I can remember. D-Star 9 comes with, reflecting on this game, I felt it was a King coaching masterclass. He hatched a plan, starting with Max in the ruck, target their senior players, take them out of the game and put the game out of their reach. It took enormous physical effort, and it showed in the last quarter and a half, but the game was won. It did a similar thing when we played West Coast and Essendon. Those times to protect our players because of short game breaks and tired bodies. Huge kudos to the coaching staff and also to the players because they embraced and followed the game plan. Early days, but I think we're seeing the emergence of a generational coach. D-Rev asks, is AFL confirming that we're now living in the Matrix? A team dominates for a half, like it can dodge bullets, then somebody switches the console off and they stop. Discuss. So, Bin Man, all those questions about the two halves, your thoughts?
Well, look, I'm going to. I won't bang on too much because I'm fearful that our recording will stop again, George. But the two halves. Of course, it was frustrating. My sort of sense of the game was, as I posted on Demonland, so I won't go into detail, but there's a clear trend that teams struggle post-bye. It's like been discussed in footy ever since the buys came in. And that's what it looked like to me. We ran out of gas in that last quarter. My sense is a few aspects. I think that King came in with a clear game plan that was to smash them physically off the park and in that first half build a lead and control it from that point on and maintain it. And that's precisely what happened. So much, I think, over-focus on the fact that they kicked 12 goals straight. I think that is, it doesn't speak to the strategy being successful. Better that we won by 6 goals. There's a clear trend for teams post-bye struggling. And so I'd made that comment in a poster on Demonland, sort of responded by saying, well, until I see some clear evidence that that's the case, I'm going to, disregard that, I guess, is the starting point. So I took up that challenge and I put into into Gemini a prompt about that to do some analysis. I've been experimenting with ChatGPT. Not with ChatGPT, with various large language models doing some footy analysis. And it's not that great, to be honest, particularly about games. Where it is good is when there's when you can look at historical data, because large language models, they scrape data and there's only good as the data that each model can access. They struggle to access real-time information. The short version of all of that was there is a clear statistical trend that teams struggle in the last quarter post-bye against teams that they are playing who don't have a bye. There's a significant drop-off in pressure ratings in that last quarter, from 180 in the first two on average in the first 3 quarters into the 160s in the final quarter. It is crystal clear. So I encourage people to, if you want the detail of put the response and the prompt that I put into Gemini on Demonland in the thread, the post-game thread. So that's got the sort of detail if you really want the evidence on that. So that is, the evidence is clear. Teams post-bye struggle to maintain their pressure and their goal scoring through to the end of the game. Watson 11 put the same prompt into Gemini as well. Thanks, Watson 11, except he asked for the score differential. And since buys came in, teams who play a team who haven't had a bye the following week, not even teams who have had a bye, post-bye, it's the differential is -4 goals, 21 points, 22 points in that last quarter. So all of that means to me that, as I said, that I was correct in my assumption. Maxi referenced it on the ground directly after the game. We were clearly out on our legs. We would have had a plan, as I mentioned before, to mitigate that. And I think we tried to go into control mode and we didn't do that particularly well. Didn't help that Maxi was off the ground, as I mentioned before. Without simplifying, and I think it's as simple as that, we ran out of puff in that last quarter. Did we load in that bye period? Of course we did. I mean, when else can you do a proper loading phase? They would have done a lead up of some description in their strengths. I can see you disagree there, George, but even if they hadn't of, the statistical trend is abundantly clear. Post-bye teams struggle to run out games. It is 100% clear. The data is clear on it. put it in your favourite large language model, get your prompt right, and you'll come up with the same response to I or to me, or go onto the Demon Land and look at the post-game thread, and I've put Gemini's response in there. It explains actually really clearly why that is. One of them is maintaining the physical intensity. There's a whole range of factors, but the data is really, really clear. Teams' pressure drops off in the last quarter significantly. Ours did. It was 146. It was 191 in the first quarter. It was 146 in the last quarter. And all the other key stats were also abundantly clear in terms of what happened to us in that last quarter. So just some of the differentials are off the chart. Some of the first quarter compared to the last quarter, the differential. So, for instance, I'm just trying to find it here on my phone. This is all a bit tricky on the phone. So in that first quarter, for instance, we were minus 13 in that first quarter for where are we? So this is all a bit lumpy. So our contested possession numbers completely fell away. As I said before, we were plus 25 in that first quarter. They fell away in the last quarter. Our pressure fell away. So for me, it's simple as that, really. I thought that, there was a question about, well, shouldn't we have done better to mitigate that? Wouldn't have they had a plan? I think they would have had a plan. The plan was to get a lead, maintain that lead, control the ball with and increase our disposal numbers, for instance, in control. And I don't think we did that particularly well. So absolutely, that's a reasonable criticism of the team. You might remember we did a similar thing, George, against Essendon, where we got a lead and fatigue was a factor in that game, and we went into control mode, and they got 3 goals after half time when we went into control mode. They didn't get 12 in a row. They got 3 in a row, though, before we did get that game back in control. You've heard King talk about it. He talks about regulate. That's control mode. When you see the Warren G sign on the bench, that's regulate, control the footy. That's what they would have been trying to do. So some of the quarter by quarter differentials are just so stark in this game in terms of the first quarter compared to the last quarter. Pressure being the big one, 191 in the first quarter, 146 in the last quarter. Without simplifying it, I think it's as simple as that, really, is to explain the first half versus the second half fade out.
It was interesting listening to Sam Mitchell's interview after the game, where he was asked the question, and he said, really, Melbourne didn't have anything really didn't have any purpose in the last quarter, in the sense that they were that far in front. It really didn't matter what happened in the last quarter. The game was well and truly over. So, and the other thing was, I was at training during the week. They weren't training hard at all. I suspect
they're not running. But George, there's 2 types of loading. There's the loading you don't see is in the weight room. They've got to do it at some time, and they always do it in the bye. They've been doing this for 7, 8 years. I don't know why we're even talking about it, to be honest.
I think the difference will be from this year to last year is that we've gone 16 rounds without getting a bye, and now we've come up against Hawthorn. They definitely gave them all the week off. It wasn't a heavy training session. If we're going to load, this is the week we'll do the load.
Because potentially the aerobic. Remember,
we're coming up against Richmond and North and the Suns. If you loaded the guys last week, you'd kill them because they've already played 16 games in a row. So
Yeah, possibly. But the point with the loading is you'd need a period of time where you can recover. So just because they had a light run on the track doesn't mean that they weren't doing extra physical work in the gym. Almost certainly were, because you've got no other period of time where you can give them a break from the game. In any case, leaving that aspect aside, the evidence is super clear post-buys that teams are rusty, and it's particularly evident in the last quarter. As I said, teams playing post-bye, the scoring differential against a team that that didn't have a bye is nearly 4 goals in that last quarter, and the drop-off in pressure is, it's clear. The evidence is clear, and it's what happened in this game. You might be right, like maybe, that they'll load up this week, but to my eye, it looked like a lot of players who were pretty tired, and in that last quarter, Langford being one of them, I thought.
Okay, on that point, we've got a question about both Windsor and Langford. First from Mr. Freeze, what do we do with Windsor going forward? All pre-season signs showed a promising role as a centre bounce attendant midfielder, but he has not lived up to expectation at all. Only 50 games in, nowhere near his ceiling, but it seems like he is just drifting. No wing role, no halfback role, playing some minutes as a mid-rotation. Need more out of him. Monocular asks, both Windsor and Langford, enormous talents, are going through quiet periods. Do they need a more defined role? Not sure at the moment if they are Arthur or Martha. Langford has had a quiet few weeks. Is it his second year blues being worked out, or uncertain as to his position and role? He does not seem to be nowhere in particular. P.S. Not in any way suggesting he should be dropped, but can you define his current position? D. Rev asks about Langford. He's been like that a bit this year. Massive game followed by a quiet one. You get that with youth. In 2 to 3 years, he'll be more consistent. Terrifying stuff. Dees 1892-27 asked, just noticed Langford only had the nine possessions. Thought he was quiet. So, Binners, Windsor and Langford.
Like I said, it's interesting. Langford, Windsor actually had a relatively good game. He was our 8th highest rated player on the game. So perhaps, depends, I guess, to what stock you put that. I probably put more stock in that than a lot of people, that player rating, but I know the clubs do. The clubs put a huge stock in it because, as I've said before, Champion Data created that rating system for the clubs because the clubs wanted a way to have a proper way of understanding someone's performance. So surprisingly, he had a much higher rating than I would have guessed. What was interesting, George, is he didn't do any midfield time. I think he had one set CBA, so I don't even know what position he was playing, actually, now that I think
of it. He started off in the mid early on in the game, but didn't notice him. I still suspect he's still carrying that foot injury of some sort. He's certainly not the same player he was 10 rounds ago, pre-injury, so it's hard to say.
He's not as dynamic, is he?
No.
But, as I said, this is probably his 3rd or 4th highest rated game for the season. He's a clever player. That goal he set up was, I can't remember who got on the end of it, was really, really clever. I think that you're probably right, like that he's probably still sort of struggling with the foot injury. For me, it's the question of why play him, and the answer for me is because it just doesn't really matter. Like if he's at least holding his own, like you pointed out before, who's going to come in and replace him? Like who's going to be better than him for a start? Like, at Casey, you'll talk about the Casey game, I didn't see it, but who's going to be better? And the critical thing for these young players, we keep forgetting, I think, well, at least the footy media does, is that we have 9, 10 players in our best 23 under 50 games. The only way to get these players up to it's really telling that Chandler is playing at the level he is now because he's up, the 80, 90 game mark, something like that.
Yeah. Once they hit that 24, 25 age point, exactly. That's when their bodies can take the rigours of AFL football. There are exceptions to that rule, like the Jason Horne-Francis or the Harley Reeds, but for most of the guys, it takes them quite a few years.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that for me, that sort of answers the question: why would you keep playing him if he's not performing at level? Well, one, that they if he's not performing at any level, they're not going to play him. He clearly is doing enough to get selected. 2, it's just critical to get them to the 70, 80 game mark. And the only way to do that is to have them play. So it's a bit of the eye to the future thing. Langford is a second-year player. It's a tough thing. Maybe you're right that they didn't do any loading in that period because of the 16, the round getting the bye that period, although they have to do it at some stage. He has, even if that's not the case, he's in his second year, and it's been a tough game. He's really asked to play a difficult role, isn't he? He does a lot of running on that wing. He's the highest rated winger in the AFL at the moment. He's kicked, I think, 14 goals. He's doing fantastic. He wasn't so great in this game, but he wasn't a disaster. I think that it's the nature of having young players, isn't it? They're not going to be stars every week. They're not going to, you've got to get them to that level of 80, 90 games. The only way to do that is to get games in, and I've got no concern about either. Though I do have a long-term concern, I guess, over Windsor's kicking. He's not as strong a kick as I'd hoped when he came into the AFL. But yeah, I have no real major concerns about either. And part of it will be, getting experience in these big games for Windsor, because we're going to make finals one way or another. If we finish top 6, you want him having games under his belt. I don't see there's much value in, if he's not good to go, the medical team aren't going to green light him playing, are they? So what's he going to do? Go back at Casey? Like it's same with Latrell. Bring him straight back in because he's best 23. Play him. This is great experience for him. He played a pretty good game of footy and he had a big win. So, I don't know. What about you? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think it's too easy. It's exactly the same. It's too easy to forget the pressures on these guys. Not only that, for Windsor in particular, because he's been thrown into the midfield. That on the wing you can run all day, but in the midfield you're slammed, you hit, you're coming up against the biggest and strongest bodies in the AFL. At the start of the season, I doubted that he would be able to withstand the rigours of midfield.
And perhaps he hasn't if he's still carrying an injury.
Yeah, it's really hard to say, but you're absolutely right. Who else have we got at Casey to come up?
That would play at his level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
or potential level.
The only one close is Henderson.
Yeah,
and. Yeah, you'd have a Windsor in before a Henderson at the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And look, the other,
and the same for Langford as well. Who else at Casey would you bring in that can play that a wing role? There's no one there, unfortunately.
Well, I don't think there's any thought about Langford not being playing, but just on Langford's performance in this game, this ground. It was like you said, it was a paddock, and it was narrower. It's much narrower than at the MCG. We like to use the width of the MCG. He likes to use the width of the MCG. If you think about his best bits of play, they're often right on the boundary, aren't they? For a big beast of a player, he wouldn't have loved those conditions, those sort of muddy conditions through the middle of the ground. I think that a lot of factors, not least of which the tiredness of a long season. Just quickly before I found it, apologies before, it was a sort of pretty terrible explanation around the first half versus second half. I couldn't find the info I was looking for on my app, sort of with this PC is not great. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of those quarter-by-quarter things. In the first quarter, we were plus 40 for disposals in the first quarter, which is amazing because they're a high disposal team. So I was super surprised in that. Plus 40 for disposals in the first quarter. We were minus 40 for disposals in the last quarter. Minus 40, that's an 80 swing in disposals. We were contested possessions plus 25 in that first quarter. We were minus 11 in the last quarter. Uncontested possessions, we were plus 18 in that first quarter. We were minus 34 uncontested possessions in the last quarter. We could not get our hands on the ball to control it. That was, for me, the big problem. We couldn't get it off them. We were plus 7 marks in the first quarter. We were minus 16 in the last quarter. These numbers are staggering in terms of how different. In the first quarter, we're plus 11 for total clearances. We were minus 3 for total clearances in that last quarter. We were plus 9 for inside 50s in the first quarter. We were minus 15 for inside 50s in the last. They just smashed us in that last quarter. And it wasn't just because we were mentally weak or whatever. It was because we were completely out on our feet. It goes on and on. We were plus 11 for shots at goal in the first quarter. We were minus 9 in the last quarter. Plus 6 for tackles in the first quarter, minus 2, and on it goes. So it just sort of dramatically highlights the difference between a team that's running on top of the ground in the first quarter and pretty much hit the wall by the beginning of the last quarter.
Okay, final group of questions from our listeners around the forward line. Gone of the Dead ask, does the panel agree that on today's performance Jefferson finally looked at the level? Only issue I saw was his kicking accuracy. Does the panel think that JVR, Jefferson and Fritter are the three-pronged forwards moving forward? What asks, is the tools of Petty, El Jeffo and JVR with the mediums Fritsch and the small, sharp and Laurie push up to contests players Chandler and Trelly a forward makeup that can make an impact in the finals? If not, what change would you make? Go Lordy on Jeffo asks, are you assuming Harry Petty goes down back when Salem is due to resume? D Rev asks again on Jeffo, consistency has been his issue all year, not just game to game, but within games. It's easy to earn plaudits when you're a forward in a team kicking 80 points in a half. So, Binman, I'll throw it across to you for a start, but what do you think of the forward setup and whether it takes us to the future?
I liked it, to be honest. I'm with you on Jeffo ran, my question mark on his competitiveness is the thing that's, you and I agree on with that. But I really liked some of that, his work in this. He got clobbered at one point, got a shirt front, hit the ground, bounced back up. It wasn't, he sort of drifts in and out of the game a bit, but I thought he was terrific against Barras. I don't know if he played on Barras the whole game, but he halved a couple of really good marking contests against Barras.
I couldn't work out who was on who because you had Sicily and Barras taking care of essentially Petty and JVR when he was down there. My question was who was on Maratz?
Yeah.
A first game player who took 6 contested marks, 12 I think in total. So somebody wasn't doing their job down the forward line about bringing the ball to ground if that was the target. So,
but they're clear. Their focus was on shutting down Barras and Sicily, and you're going to bob one up. We still, as I said before in the stats file, we still had more intercept marks than them, and that was key to us winning. You're right, Maratz was. But, a lot of them were in that last quarter, so I wouldn't over-egg the pudding. But you're right in terms of that. I don't know about you, but I really like that forward line setup. I thought it was Jefferson's best game. If I was honest, that's probably the first time I've thought to myself, you know what, I reckon maybe Jeffo's got a future. That handoff he gave to Laurie was a beautiful collect, and it was so clever how quickly he gave it to him. He did something else, and also I think I'm not worried about his accuracy. He's got excellent kicking technique, which if you look at his goal that he did on the run, you can really see how strong his technique is. It was a beautiful kick. I don't know about you, but I thought that was Jefferson's best game for the club. I'm still sort of, I guess I'm holding my shares. You've got options, but there was a lot to like, and it was really interesting. King pumped him up. When he gets his hands, for me, he leads really well, and he times his run at the ball really well. He gets his hands. He's got long arms. He gets his hands out in front of his eyes when he takes the mark. If he can get really stronger over the next couple of years, which he will as a developing key forward, I think there's a lot of upside. But, yeah, for me, that was his best game of footy that I'd seen him play and gave me a little bit more confidence that we're on the right track. I like that mix of having Petty. I mean, we've lost Myercheck now. It's unlikely he's going to play again. So if JVR plays like that, that Jefferson can play a defensive role. Petty was awesome in this game. I thought
was fantastic.
Mark was great. And he's a swingman. So the short answer, I quite like that setup. How about you?
Once again, the barrel's pretty thin. That's Kentfield or no one else in terms of the forwards. Jeffo, look, we'll be talking about this for the next couple of years, I suspect. But my concern was exactly what who was it? D Rev said. It's not just game to game, but it's also in game. I think in the last quarter, particularly, had didn't touch the ball until 15 seconds before the end. When things are going well, that's fine. The ball's down there, getting down the forward line. But I noticed JVR was all over the ground in the last quarter, throwing, putting in the effort.
He was great, wasn't he, in that last quarter?
He was fantastic. I didn't see that from Jeffo, and that's what he's got to learn to do. To quote John Kennedy, the old Hawthorn coach, was "Don't think, do." That's all you got to do, Jeffo. Just do. Don't think about what you've got to do. Just go and do it. And I think that's certainly the case with JVR. Petty was fantastic, but Kentfield had a untypical game, I suppose, at Casey. Nothing much to write about at Casey in total. We'll talk about that, but Kentfield's the only option that we've got, having lost all the other ones.
And I'm just looking, I just realised because I'm trying to do this on my phone and on the laptop, so sorry, listeners, but I'm just looking at the player ratings to see what his rating was for the game. Jefferson. His rating for the game was 7.2, which is, that's pretty good. It's a pretty solid game of footy, nothing to write home about. But put it this way, he was above Harvey Langford in this game and above Jake Lever, Blake Howes, a few. But he was 5.1 of his rating points was in the first quarter. And I muddled up my player ratings. I must have slid up on my phone to the Adelaide game. Van Rooyen, I was right. It was his highest rated game, 23.5 player rating points he had in this game. Roo Gawn was second. CJ had his best game of footy for the Melbourne Footy Club, statistically, at least rating it 18.5. And Fritter he was our fifth highest player. So scratch everything I said before about that, except for Van Rooyen and Maxi Gawn, coincidentally enough. So it's two great games back to back by Roo. But Fritter had he was our fifth highest rated player on the ground. CJ, huge game, 18.5. I would hazard a guess that's his highest rated game of footy. Would be close to it. I thought he was awesome, CJ. What did you think about CJ's game?
Yeah, he was fantastic. He unfortunately in that last quarter, I think a couple of times he got match with Chol is the way it worked out, and everybody, Chol finally did some work on the ground and got the rewards for it. But unless Chol was doing what he was doing, Hawthorn wouldn't have kicked 12 goals in a row. But everything that was thrown at Chol certainly in the second half, he was marking, and he was unbeatable. He beat Lever a couple of times quite easily. But yeah, CJ was fantastic, particularly the drive that he gave to the forward line in that, very importantly in the first half.
Well, yeah, spot on. I was just about to. That's exactly right. In that first quarter, so his rating was 18.5. So it was Roo, Gawn, CJ, Bailey, Fridge, Bowie, Daniel Turner, Colt. They were our top nine. So forget what I said before. Sorry, listeners. That was the Adelaide game. But 8.4 of his player rating points were in that first quarter. 8.4 of Maxi's player rating points were in that first quarter. Huge games by both of them. And there was a bit of criticism for Chol beating him in the aiming, but there must be about a 20-kilo difference between the two. Easy. And a couple of times CJ looked around, where was the third man in? And, when pressure drops off, as we've talked about forever and a day, again, that's why the defenders would have been criticised by King and the midfielders. If you don't apply enough pressure on that last kick inside 50, then, of course, the forwards are going to mark. Chol, when the game was there to be won, Chol was nowhere. And CJ, I thought, was really, really influential. As you said, particularly in that first half, he got 10 of his rating points, 10.4 of them were in that first half. And I thought Disco had a good game defensively as well. Our defensive system is looking heaps better at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. That's all for that game. Casey versus Port Melbourne. You didn't see any of this, did you?
Highlights only. I actually read it, the sort of game before. I thought I'd try and see if I could watch, but I can't. You can't watch anything from Cambodia.
Yeah.
And I read the Demonland thread on it, and up to about half time, thought, we might win this game, but it sounds like we were terrible in that second half.
Yeah, we were terrible. I wouldn't recommend even trying to see the replay because they've disconnected the sound from the visual component, and the sound's about 10 seconds ahead of what you see on the screen. So well done, AFL, yet again. This was a really forgettable game from the Casey point of view. They were in the game against Port, who are not unlike Williamstown, just tough, hard. Footballers all round, and eventually they take Casey down. There really wasn't much to talk about in it. What was interesting, and for a start off though, Max Heath didn't play. He wasn't named as an emergency, and he didn't play in this game. So that's the injury conundrum for the week. So hopefully we'll find out during this week. Other observation was there was a lady umpire, I reckon, who's the smallest umpire in the league, number 10. She seems to umpire pretty well, but she is quite literally half the size of vertically of some of the players on the ground. So, but if she's a good umpire, that's all that really matters to us. The other good thing about this particular commentary was they had Gemma Bastiani doing the commentary. Finally, we've got someone, who knows about football. Her commentary was just superb, giving insights about the players, about the way they were playing. The sooner we can get rid of people like Brian Taylor who know nothing about the game and put someone in who does, it'd be a real positive. It was like listening to when Daisy Pearce was doing the commentary in the past. They really had the insights into what was going on. AJ played he was probably the best of the pack. 3 goals in the game. He was also rucking as well. Did reasonably well, but of course the Port rucks are those solid aged type of rucks that are typified at Port Melbourne. They started to use Onley as a mid in this game, which was interesting a couple of times. So I think that's where he's a big boy, and I think that's where they'll eventually push him through. So that was good. The other sort of standout for me was again Xavier Taylor. He's really starting to fit into the mould of AFL football. He not only knows how to get the ball, he looks for it, he delivers. He's really calm. Bastiani described him during the game as Jake Lever Mark II. So that was interesting. The wind at Casey was a big factor in the game. Casey should know how to play the wind at that ground, but the goal kicking was pretty awful from both sides, as from the set shots in particular. As I've harped on about in the last couple of weeks, when the going gets tough, there's a whole series of players at Casey who are just barely VFL level, and it destroys the work that others have done up the field when people can't execute simple kicks or simple handballs, and sadly there's a good number of them in the side. Henderson, I think, with Bergman topped the disposals, but the disposals weren't anything that caused the game to swing either way. It was just lots of numbers and not much else. His lack of vision seems to be the common problem about where you're going to put the ball, the decision making. So yeah, Port after leading by 9 points into the last quarter, Port kicked the last 6 goals of the game. That was coming from sort of halfway through the third quarter, but the last 6 goals of the game, they just ground them into the ground.
There was a wind, wasn't there? Like it was.
The wind was cross the ground, favouring slightly to one end, but it was consistent. When you were kicking to the goal, it didn't matter whether it was one end or the other. You had to aim to the left or right of the post as required. Casey now sits 17th on the ladder. 2 games and percentage out of the top 10, so short of some sort of miracle, they won't be playing even wildcard games. So disappointing game. White kicked a couple of Joe the Goose goals. He got 2 goals for the game, but they were both quite literally inside the 10-metre mark. But unfortunately, and as Kentfield was described as having an almost day, almost kicked goals, almost did this, almost took a mark, but nothing to write home about. So not really much there for us.
Just a couple of thoughts. What was with Port Melbourne's jumper? They got one of the best bloody jumpers in Australian footy, and they look like a candy store or something. That was, I guess, a Clash jumper.
I don't know what that one was.
Yeah, it was a clashing in my head when I saw a picture of it. Now, just quickly, there's probably listeners. We don't edit the show, and we won't be editing. Or Andy will do a good job to knit these together. But there's probably a few people who are screaming, what is going on with the player rating. So Caleb Windsor didn't have a rating of 6.9 in this game. I was looking at the Adelaide game. He had 0.9. His rating was, so fair call on that. He was our second lowest rated player. Harvey Langford, he was negative 2.4 in that last quarter. Caleb Caleb Windsor. So, and a lot of our younger players had poor last quarters. Harvey Langford also had a pretty average game, 4.8 player rating points. But I wanted to ask you about one player. Our lowest rated player had quite a few disposals. Our lowest rated player below Caleb Windsor, who was our second lowest rated player, was Joel Fitzgerald. He had a player rating in this game of negative 1.1. What's your thoughts about where he's at?
Again, this is a new player to the AFL system. I think he hasn't learned to move up and down the ground like others have yet. In the midfield, he's in the grunt situations, he's great, and probably wouldn't register in player ratings because
that's a fair call.
Just doesn't get the ball. He doesn't travel with the ball. He doesn't move it, but he's a very useful inside grunt player. So yeah, long way to go, and like we've spoken about before, that apart from Henderson, there's not too many options down at Casey. So
probably see Cross. We'll talk about this. Probably see Cross come back in. But he only had 59% game time in this game, Fitzgerald. So and the other one was, you're spot on. I think you're probably right about Windsor. He only had 66% game time. So they're managing him a bit, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, still there, Binmed? Sorry.
Yeah.
Just a brief drop out there. Okay.
We're almost there to the finishing line.
Almost there. We've got the game against the Tigers this weekend. We'll have a look at the game for a start. What do you think? What do you think? We're Richmond at the moment. What do we need to do? And I don't know whether you've seen the Richmond game last week in particular, and then any possible changes.
Look, it's interesting because I'll do the preview pod. So just a reminder for listeners, I'm no longer doing a review of the previous game. It was just too much work for me, but also, probably not that many, people want to listen to a deep dive on the review of a game 6 days hence of past the game. But so I'll unpack it. It'll be really interesting because you might well be right. Like it'll be fascinating to see what approach they take in terms of this game. I think we'll know fairly on. I'm hoping we'll see. I thought we'd see a much faster transition game in the one just gone. One of the numbers in the statistical numbers in the game just gone against Hawks that I could not believe. This is one of the things I like about data. We've averaged 350 odd handball meters gained. It's been a critical part of the way we play, particularly in the first third of the season when you play high transition footy. In this game, we only had 11 metres gained by hand, which is way by our lowest number. Like it's just, there's nothing even close to 11. Part of that was because of the pressure we applied. We did a great job, I think, of disrupting their ball movement out of the back half, partly because Impey and Eamon weren't playing. But it meant that it was a really forward half. We got a lot of our turnover scores. I'm not sure how many of our 67 points on turnover were in that front half, but I'd be guessing over 50% would be from the front half. We just kept it trapped in our forward line. I'll be really curious to see. I'm hoping, because I want to see us play that fast attacking brand of footy. I'm hoping we'll do that against the Tigers, but a lot will depend on whether you're right, whether they are going to, if they do a physical sort of more difficult heavier block of training, then they will probably have to go into control mode again. They would have looked forward and planned. You may well be right that this is the game they would have targeted to be able to do that, which will make for a pretty dull game of footy in some respects. So I think it'd be, something similar is try and get us a lead in the game and then go into control mode again. But personally, I'm hoping to see us smash them off the park. So I didn't see the Carlton Richmond game. I saw it was a 2-point margin, but I've got no other context other than that. But I don't rate Carlton despite the fact I think they've won 7 in a row. I hope they keep winning and that they go, well, we have to put Fraser in charge, and then then they lose their first 15 of next season. So I don't know. Did you see that game?
Yes, unfortunately, and I'll never get that time back again. Yeah, if there was a game that highlighted turnovers, it was this game. It was just back and forth. Both teams are just substandard. There's a reason why Richmond are where they are on the ladder, and Carlton have ridden this sort of wave of the new coach over the last couple of weeks, but they're just as bad. They are just as bad. They've got highly talented players who just cannot deliver. That's Carlton, but we won't talk about that. Richmond are getting slightly better. They've got a couple of players, but they've got Nankervis back in the last 2 weeks. They had Lynch back this week, although he still can't kick straight. And
he's a long way off it.
Yeah, he's quite frankly shot as well. Both Nankervis and Lynch are both shot. If it wasn't for a couple of their smalls and people like Launceston and Broad still moping around in the back line, it wouldn't have even been a close game. But they're just devoid of talent, unfortunately, for them. So it's a chance for a reasonable sort of win this week. It's at the MCG, so that's a good thing for us.
I fly back in on Sunday morning, George. At 7 a.m. and I'm going to the footy and I can't wait because, at the MCG. It's interesting because this game, so I've been doing the preview pods all season. Hawthorn was first time we'd played a team second time, and crazily, it seemed like it was only a few weeks before because the previous game was
10. Five games, wasn't it?
It's nuts, isn't it? It's ridiculous. The AFL, don't get me started again. Richmond's the second. And when I did the preview for Richmond, they had 23 players on their injury list. So, unbelievable. They've got some back, as you said, Nankervis. I don't even think Nankervis was on that injury list back then. Did he play in that last time we played him?
I thought, no, I don't think he
Maybe
did.
Didn't. So yeah. I don't know how. I haven't looked. I'll look for the preview pod, which I'll look to do by midweek. They're a long way behind the 8 ball. But if you get 23 players, you're not playing. It's a bloody crisis for them.
Yeah,
it's a critical game though. All of that. We've got to get the 4 points, and we've got to get the 4 points against the Roos next week. So I don't care about the margin. I don't want to hear. People want to put on Demon Land, we've got to beat this mob by 100 points, whatever. People on Demon Land don't seem to be happy half the time when you beat a top 4 team in Hawthorn by 36 points. So, I'm be happy with a win. Yeah. I haven't seen the betting, but I suspect the line will be something like 30 points. I'd be happy if we get a 5-goal win and bank the 4 points. I wonder what they'll do with the selection. I've got no idea with selection, but I think it'll be partly to do with your point. I think, thinking about it, you're probably right that it would be a logical time to load or do a heavy block of training in the lead up to this game, in which case they might rotate some of those runners. Maybe a Cross comes in and Fitzgerald goes out, and you look to keep players fresh that way, and you manipulate time on ground. So it's a bit hard to predict with that, but I hope, for my sake and fans' sake, we go along to the footy and we see a super exciting game of footy, and we get back to our high transition, high handball meters gained and put on a big score, and it's an entertaining game of footy.
Yeah, I think we should win this game. I'm concerned about Nankervis absolutely throwing his body all the time at max. We can't afford to have Max injured in any way, shape, or form. But
it was Bolter who did his back last time, wasn't it?
Yeah, Bolter was definitely the best on ground for Richmond against Carlton. But they were using him in the ruck, they were using him in the back line, they were using him in the forward line, and he was delivering everywhere. So it'll be interesting, but it was almost like a one-man team last week. So, yeah, ins and outs. I don't think there'll be any change. Like I said, there was no one outstanding at Casey, and the ones that
selection integrity. You have a 6-goal win down at Tassie against a top 4 team. Yeah, it's pretty tough to drop anyone. Maybe Cross for Fitzgerald, perhaps.
Yeah, or even Windsor if you still carry. I really don't know. Yeah, we've got to wait and see, and we'll hopefully find out what the story is with Max Heath. Okay, I think that's about all for this week. Big thank you to everyone. Thanks to Andy for putting this all together. Thanks for stitching together the 2 halves that we've recorded. Thanks to my co-host in Binman, and thanks to the listeners and their questions. Gone are the Dead, Monocular, Buck Naked, D-Rev, Dees 1892-27, Go Lordy, What Say What, Mr. Freeze, D-Star 9, Wells 11 and Sam D. Thank you, everyone. And just a last reminder, there's an open training session on Wednesday this week at Gosh's starting at 10 o'clock, which features both the men's and the women's team, so you can get to see the whole lot, and you can bring the kids along as well and get autographs and all those sort of things. And no doubt there'll be some sort of food truck or something that the Demon Army would appreciate you supporting as well. So that's it for this week. Thank you, Demon fans. Go Dees.
Go Red Leggers.
It's a grand old flag. It's a high-flying flag. It's an emblem for me and for you. Well, it's the emblem of the team we love, the team of the red and the blue. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we sing a song for you. Should old acquaintance be forgot, keep your eye on the red and the blue. Well, the team played fine in the year 39. We're the team that no one can lick. And you'll find us there after the final bell with the spirit of 1926. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we sing this song to you. Should old acquaintance be forgotten,